As we continue our week-long focus on the DPRK nuclear issue, we'll be considering whether the latest interactions between China and the US are likely to generate any kind of dialogue on the issue. And after China's first cargo spaceship was successfully launched, we'll be asking how will it shape the future of China's space industry. Welcome to The Point. I'm Liu Xin. Tianzhou-1 was successfully launched into space at 7:41 p.m. local time on Thursday in southern China's Hainan province. It is the first cargo ship independently developed by China. How will this launch shape the future of China's space industry? To find out more, I'm joined by Mr. Karl Bergquist, Administrator of the External Relations Department of the European Space Agency, or ESA, and Mark Hamsell, President of the British Interplanetary Society. But first, what will be the job of Shenzhou-1? Here's a look.
As a space cargo ship, Tianzhou-1 is to transport goods to China's space laboratory in orbit Tiangong-2. The goods include food, water, oxygen and other materials that are necessary for the astronauts to survive in the space lab. The cargo ship will also take any waste from the space lab back to Earth. Secondly, Tianzhou-1 will carry out 3 test dockings with Tiangong-2 to check its ability to connect with the space lab from and within different time limits. Thirdly, once the first docking is complete, the Tianzhou-1 and the Tiangong-2 will operate as one entity for about 2 months. During this time, the cargo ship will refuel the space lab with propellant, and operators will test the cargo ship's control over the space lab. Last but not least, the Tianzhou-1 will fly in orbit on its own after it undocks from the Tiangong-2 for the second time. The solo journey is expected to last for 3 months. During this interval, the cargo ship will carry out its own scientific experiments. Once its final docking with Tiangong-2 is complete, the Tianzhou-1 will come back to Earth. As China plans to build its own space station in the future, Tianzhou-2's missions may be invaluable to the cause.
Well, that was what would be a perfect launch. At this moment, we are still very early and we don't know how successful the mission will be. But gentlemen, first of all, welcome to the show. How do you look at the significance of this launch, and how shall we measure Shenzhou-1's development stage based on international levels? Mr. Bergquist, let me come to you first.
Well, I think this is a very important launch. Of course, this is a fundamental step in the building up of the capacities in view of having building up the Chinese space station. A cargo vehicle is a little bit like a ship. If you sit on an island, of course, you need to get water, fuel, everything that you need to live on the island. You need to get it shipped to this. So grasping the technology, such as the cargo vehicle, as Tianzhou is very, very important.
Yeah, Mr. Hamsell, what is your take on this question? What caught your attention about this launch so far?
I think that the important thing is that it will complete all the technology demonstration that China needs to build its main space station that's coming up in the next few years. So this completes the task of demonstrating all the capabilities it needs.
Now, one of Shenzhou-1's main tasks is to refuel the Tiangong-2 space lab in orbit. What's special about this refueling process? Does it differ from any other solutions for refueling space labs other countries use, Mr. Bergquist?
No, I think this is a technology that you need to grasp, because you're doing this under microgravity. And don't forget also that space is it's harsh out there. It's not an easy environment. And to do the refueling is a very, very important step in order to be able to sustain a space station over a longer period of time. So this is really, as we said, a very fundamental step.
Mr. Hamsell, what is your take on this, please?
Yes, you can do it another way, which is you just build a propulsion pack that you keep replacing, but that's not quite so elegant. And in the longer term, if you can refuel spacecraft you can get your spacecraft to go anywhere. It's like a car. If you couldn't refuel a car, you could only go as far as the petrol tank would allow. If you've got the technology to refuel spacecraft, you can keep refueling them and get them to anywhere you want. So it's a very important technology, which only the Russians so far have also got.
Mr. Bergquist, experts say that Tianzhou-1 has the strongest carrying capacity compared with cargo ships commissioned by other countries. How do you think China has been able to achieve this? Is there any new technologies involved in this regard?
I think China has been building on the national capacity that they have. I think when it comes to overall power of the system, I think the ATV had was similarly powerful, but of course the ratio of power compared to the Tiangong and compared to ISS is very different. So in that sense, I think it's a cost-effective cargo vehicle.
Mr. Hemsel, now China has been blocked by the US from joining the International Space Station, or the ISS, with the excuse that it would threaten the US's national security. Some experts say that the US fears China would steal their technologies if China joins. Now that China has proved its abilities in launching its own cargo ship and having its own space lab, if not a space station, will this be a turning point in US-China aerospace industry cooperation in your eyes?
No, I rather suspect not. The US position is solely political. I think China could build the Starship Enterprise and the US would still not be terribly interested in cooperating.
Yeah, but do you see any kind of a turnaround in the future, or China potentially stepping up cooperation with other countries? Mr. Bergquist, yes, go ahead, Mr. Hemsel.
I was just going to say, I don't see any changes there at the moment, but they're politically motivated and they're not fully logical or rationally discernible. So we just have to wait and see. With new administrations, maybe changes will come.
Mr. Bergquist, what is your take on this? And also, what is the current state of cooperation between China and European countries on space exploration, and whether the launch of Tianzhou-1 will have any difference on that, will have any impact on that?
Well, on ESA's side, our member states and the ministers of our member states took a decision 2 years ago to made a resolution stating that China was one of ESA's strategical partners together with Russia and the US. And we have a very large cooperation with China, not only in the area of manned spaceflight, but also in space science and Earth applications, scientific applications of Earth observation data, etc. In the area of manned space flight, we are working together with the Chinese Manned Space Engineering Office in 3 areas. One is utilization, scientific utilization, getting scientists to work together on experiments, etc., to use the space station in an efficient way. The second thing is astronaut training, and we have shared experiences. Last year we actually had a survival exercise, which was very interesting because we had astronauts from all the countries. So we had US, Russian, Japanese, Chinese, and our European astronauts participating in one experiment. It was, I think, the first time all astronauts from the world took part in one such exercise. And the third area, which is a bit more complicated, that is infrastructure. That is more perhaps for the future to see how we can cooperate.
Mr. Hemsel, now Shenzhou-1 has laid a solid foundation for building China's own space station, which is to be finished around 2020. The only space station in commission now is the ISS, as I mentioned, led by the US, but the ISS is estimated to retire in 2024. By then, China might be the only country in possession of an in-orbit space station. How do you view this possibility?
I don't think it's going to work out like that. The space station will almost certainly be extended beyond 2024. The Russian element can be separated from, and the Russians have said they will operate it independently if the ISS comes to an end. The US is looking at commercially built space stations to replace the ISS. So I don't think that the Chinese space station will be the only one, but I think the space stations that it will share space with will be of a similar size to it and not as big as the ISS.
Mr. Bergquist, what is your estimation?
Yes, I think that it's difficult to say what will happen after 2024. There is a possibility, of course, that the life extension of ISS is prolonged. Those are political decisions, budgetary decisions, etc. We're also seeing what is happening on the commercial side. So what will happen after 2024 is to be seen, I think.
Now, Space Exploration Technologies Corporation, better known as SpaceX, is an American aerospace manufacturer and space transport service company. SpaceX now drew worldwide attention with the successful launch and landing of a recycled rocket on March the 30th, now which costed only 70% as much as a new missile. Do you see a trend of space industry being transformed into, or more commercial elements being incorporated into space industry, Mr. Hemsel?
Yes, I see both more commercial supply of services. Whether that is really as beneficial as NASA thinks, I don't know. I think more important is we will see more use of reusable systems, particularly launch systems, and that has the potential to greatly reduce the cost of doing things in space.
Mr. Bergquist?
Yes, I think that we're seeing a trend, and that is of course the issue is really to reduce costs. And in the US they have taken important decisions, notably on the commercial orbital transportation service, the OCTS, where they are already together with, as you mentioned, SpaceX, private enterprises that are issuing launch services to commercial enterprise, and reducing the cost. And I think this is something that we all are in Europe, where we're developing the Ariane 6. Of course, the launch cost is a key issue, that to reduce the cost of the price to get spacecrafts into orbit.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. That was Mr. Carl Bergquist from the European Space Agency and Mr. Mark Hemsel, President of the British Interplanetary Society. And here is my take of this story. Now, the name of the cargo ship Tianzhou actually means sky boat. In this case, I guess we're talking about a sky ferry. Eventually, the sky ferry will burn up on re-entry into the atmosphere in a controlled manner. This is only the first step of the mission of the sky ferry. In 2 days' time, it will have to dock with the orbiting space lab Tiangong 2. So whether or not the whole mission can be judged a success, we'll have to wait and see. Now, if successful, this mission will mark another milestone in space exploration, not just for China, but also for mankind, we hope. And you're watching The Point with me, Liu Xin, here on CGTN. I'll be back right after this. The US president has been putting pressure on China to solve the DPRK problem. To sweeten the pill, he has backtracked on branding China a currency manipulator. Now, President Xi Jinping said during a phone call on the 12th of April to President Trump following his Mar-a-Lago visit that China would continue to coordinate and communicate with the US on the issue. Will the interaction between China and the US generate any new round of dialogue in any form, as opposed to the long-stalled six-party talks initiated in 2003? Joining me today to discuss this topic is Sean Ho, Associate Research Fellow at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies in Singapore, and Professor Su Hao from China Foreign Affairs University. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. Now, Mr. Ho, the US and China have a common goal to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. What is their relationship in trying to solve these problems at this particular moment? Mr. Ho, please.
I think they are talking to each other. Yes. I think they are talking to each other and trying to come to some kind of new agreement on how to move forward on this issue, because, as you know, this is a long-standing issue that has not had much progress over a long time. And now, hopefully, with a new US administration, there can be some progress on this issue.
Professor Su, now the latest news was that the Foreign Ministry of China denied that China's special envoy on the DPRK nuclear issue, Mr. Wu Dawei, was in the DPRK for any kind of visit. So that means the DPRK did not grant any permission to the visit of that special envoy. Some people are saying that it's because the DPRK is angry with the how should I say, the claimed cooperation between China and the United States. What do you think is the relationship between the two countries, between China and the United States, on the DPRK issue at this moment?
Well, actually, we know that China and the DPRK are the normal relation with each other, right? Even though in the past we have the so-called alliance relation, but now it becomes the, because some problems of the Korean Peninsula issues, or the nuclear issue, or even some problem bilateral relation, so make us just low down a little bit, so it becomes the normal relations. So, in this context, so China and the United States, we are share some kind of common ground to keep the normal relation with North Korea. That means not only China, but also the United States. On the one hand, we like to keep the North Korea as a state. So the reason why is officials of the United States say that they would like to respect the North Korea as their normal state and to not conduct a so-called regime change. And on the other hand, both sides, China and the United States, we share the common ground that they have the North Korea to commit to conduct its commitment of the denuclearization in their, some years ago, their joint declaration or statement of the September 19th. So regarding this kind of common ground, China and the United States, we are do something together to calm down the tension of the North Korea, action to provoke the tension, over the Korean Peninsula, but also we also could respect the survivors of the North Korea.
Okay. Professor Ho, now before the two presidents met in Mar-a-Lago, Florida, President Trump was putting a lot of pressure on China. However, in a most recent interview, he told journalists that after 10 minutes talking to Chinese President Xi, he kind of understood that the situation on the Korean Peninsula is much more complicated than what he thought. From the events, however, that have unfolded on the peninsula following the meeting, do you think the relationship between China and the U.S. have changed in this regard? If so, how?
So the last week, April 15, was the founding leader of North Korea's birthday. So that has really caused a lot of tension to escalate in the region. But thankfully, there was no nuclear test. Thankfully, there was a missile launch, but a failed missile launch. And I think this has really shown how the U.S. Presence in the region has helped to calm things down, and hopefully they can work together on this as well.
Now, speaking of China-U.S. cooperation, the previous efforts go back to 2003 when China initiated the six-party talks. However, the talks ended up with the DPRK conducting more nuclear-related activities. Professor Su, what do you think are the reasons behind the failure of the previous rounds of six-party talks?
We know North Korea, as the very special state, they facing the big challenges from outside of the world, particularly from the Western society and also the South Korea. So the survival for this country is overall goal for this, national governance. But South Korea and the United States always take the target North Korea as the so-called ridiculous and the so-called their special state. So they want to conduct the regime change conspiracy. So make North Korea also feels very dangerous, also scareful about their so-called regime change from the South, from the Western society. The reason why North Korea want to take some kind of pillar for their survival of nations. So, obtains the nuclear capacity is the overall goal for this kind of a state. The reason why, even though they have their six-party talks in the past, even though they have their joint statement, but the United States, their South Korea, or still continues their so-called regime change policy towards North Korea. So North Korea always feels scareful about their, some kind of possible change to themselves. The reason why they always try to pursue their nuclear capacity building.
Mr. Ho, what is your take on this question? Do you think there is any opportunity that any kind of talk is possible in the near future?
I don't think the six-party talks are likely to resume anytime soon because all the parties have been trying, especially China, to push ahead with this over the last few years, but not too much success. And currently, there's no sign that the North Koreans are keen to come back to the six-party talks as well. And it doesn't seem that the North Koreans are interested in this kind of multilateral talks. So perhaps some other new platform may be beneficial to push forward and find progress in this issue.
Well, China has said that it is open to other other forms of dialogue or negotiations. What do you think are any practical possibilities, Mr. Professor Su, in your eyes? And is there any possible chance that some kind of dialogue can be initiated, for instance, between the United States and the DPRK, now that the President Trump says its ultimate goal is not a regime change?
Well, for China's foreign policy towards the North Korea is always contingencies of their so-called peaceful negotiation. And we think that it is only way to maintain the stability and to keep their North Korean survival, and also to reduce the tension and even avoid the conflict over the North and South Korea. So this kind of policy is still there. There's so much tension over the Korean Peninsula. So make Chinese side, aware very much about the kind of their tensive situation. So Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi also said that a few weeks ago that to stop, and the process of negotiation or process of the frame building is our new policy towards the Korean Peninsula issue. As we, South Korea and the United States in the past already conduct some kind of the very threatening policy towards North Korea. So it's not a very responsible behavior to keep the stability of the Korean Peninsula. So from China's side, we say that on the one hand, the South should stop their so-called military drill against the North, and to the North Korea, they should stop the of their nuclear capacity building, and also the launching their missiles against the others. So this to stop will be the key points for Chinese foreign policy toward the Korean Peninsula issue.
Mr. Ho, what do you think would be the key to any kind of dialogue or negotiations being started if we set aside the six-party talks which have not been working?
I think there are two things we can look at. One is to resume some kind of track 2 talks between the North Koreans and the Americans, which they have done before in the past. I think that would be a soft step to resume some kind of dialogue and let both sides talk to each other to better understand each other's position and to calm things down. And secondly, I also think that since the DPRK is already part of the ASEAN Regional Forum, they should continue to be engaged through this platform, which is already in existence, where all the major parties involved in the nuclear issue are also involved in the ASEAN Regional Forum. So that could be another platform to engage North Korea, to understand their concerns and see how we can calm things down and make progress on this nuclear issue.
As we talk about escalated tensions on the Korean Peninsula and very strong rhetorics from both sides, there have been attempts, let's say, for the two sides, I mean the United States and the DPRK, to contact each other. Now, at the same time, however, do you think, gentlemen, that the United States and the DPRK could back down either side from their entrenched position without fearing, not just with their domestic audiences, but also internationally? Professor Su?
Well, at the moment, there's a very dangerous situation of the Korean Peninsula. We say this is some kind of the chicken games. Both sides want to take the very harsh attitude towards others. And for example, like the United States already dispatched their so-called armadors, the fleet, towards the Korean Peninsula area, try to make some kind of deterrent policy towards North Korea. And on the other hand, North Korea, traditionally, they have the very hawkish attitude towards the others, towards the United States and South Korea. So they cannot dare about their threat from the United States, from South Korea. So, like there's the two cars move ahead with each other. So it's very dangerous. But I would say that so far both sides had not prepared for the war with each other. So this could be common ground for both sides.
Yeah, Mr. Ho, how do you look at how the situation would develop, especially when we have the upcoming DPRK Army Foundation Day on April the 25th?
I see it as quite a crucial period over the next few days before April 25th, before the North Korean People's Army's Foundation Day. After that, if nothing happens, there's no nuclear tests and there's no missile tests, and the situation, I think, will really calm down, and all parties, North Korea, the US, can really reflect on what has happened over the past few weeks. And I think it's still not too late for President Trump to have a change in slight policy, to be talking to the North Koreans more and to engage them. And he's still quite new into his administration, so there are still options available. He has not been tied down to any particular option yet.
Professor Su, finally, when we are hearing the U.S. Secretary of Foreign Secretary Tillerson talking about Iran, are you suspecting that they have shifted their attention somewhere else now?
Well, for the United States, it's some kind of balance situation for both sides, the Middle East and North Korea. Well, but from American officials' words, they said that North Korea is the overall threat to the United States national security. But I don't think it's really the physical threat towards the United States, but there's some problem for the Americans' national security safeguard, because they want to keep their alliance relation with its friends like the South Korea and Japan. So if there's so much tensive situation in North Korea and over the Korean Peninsula, that makes the big challenge towards the United States to manage its relations with its friends. So I think that at the moment, North Korea is still there on the top agenda for the Americans' foreign policy.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. That was Sean Ho from the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, joining us from Singapore, and Professor Su Hao from the China Foreign Affairs University. And here is my last point of the day. Now, while we're talking about the current situation, let's not lose sight of what happened in the past. It was the United States that first brought nuclear weapons to the Korean Peninsula in 1957, and the DPRK did not start its own nuclear program until 2 decades later. Since the 1990s, every time there was some kind of agreement between the DPRK and the US to stop the DPRK's nuclear program, an incoming US government would make a flip-flop, turning back on their promises, only to provoke the DPRK further into its own quest for safety. So while China stands firmly against a nuclear-armed DPRK, consistency in US government policies is needed to denuclearize the peninsula eventually. Unfortunately, that's not something we can expect from this administration. That's all for this edition of The Point with Liu Xin. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle ThePointWithLX. Download the CGTN Live application to watch our show on your mobile devices. For previous shows, go to the CGTN channel of YouTube, click on the playlist and look for The Point with Liu Xin. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow at the same time.